The Discord server may be a hive of scum and villainy, but occasionally something useful arises from the muck. This video was inspired by a user, NotYourBusiness89, thank God it's not 60, posting inane questions. But you throw enough stuff at the wall and eventually one sticks. And that one? What if Jaime Lannister didn't break his oath? At first, this question seems limited in potential, but when you think about the full ramifications, you quickly realize that everything in the series as we know it would no longer exist. First off, let's set the scene. Jaime choosing to become the Kingslayer is by itself actually not that impactful on the series. It's really his neutralization of Pyromancer Rosart, the Mad King's final hand. King's Landing blowing up is almost incomparable to a real life event due to the sheer scale and how that would happen. Tobby said it was like 9/11 times 100, but that still doesn't match the sheer devastation that King's Landing turning into a bonfire would be. Nothing really comes close to Aerys just lighting a match and a city being erased in a blink of an eye. If Jaime hesitated a second or two more, that would have been enough that he's no longer able to catch Rosart leaving the Red Keep. Whereupon Aerys' plan to show Denethor how it's done comes to fruition. Presuming the show grants us a reasonable expectation of what a conga line of wildfire caches can produce, the entire city is more or less immolated, including the entering Lannister vanguard. That's right, Tywin, Kevin, and Big Greg all join Aerys' wildfire snap. Overnight, up to 500,000 perish among the flames. Notable figures such as Aerys, Elia Martell and her children, Jaime, Pycelle, and even Varys. That's the largest city on the eastern seaboard of Westeros wiped off the map, along with the literal seat and possessors of legitimate power. The Iron Throne is now the molten stool, the treasury resembles Vizzy's faced post-crowning, and Ned's first responsibility upon arriving on the scene is not to take control of the Red Keep, but to watch a city of 500,000 people burn. There is no fighting that fire. So, what now? After piecing together what in the Seven Hells happened,
what the fuck is this piece of shit?
And accounting for the casualties, the ever honourable Ned throws himself into organising a refugee camp for any survivors, if there were any. And just as that goes into practice, Robert, at the head of the coalition's host, arrives. Further reporting and consultation lay out a curious strategic picture. Stannis is still holding Storm's End against the Tyrells, though that will end as soon as word reaches them of Aerys' all-inclusive funeral pyre. Further south, Doran Martell is certain to immediately renounce his previous loyalties once news of the murder of Elia and her children reaches him. On the positive side though, the removal of Tywin, his brother and crucially firstborn son, leaves the Westerlands decapitated and saddled with a sudden succession crisis. Tradition would dictate the eldest surviving son will inherit the Rock. Yet, Tyrion is a malformed child of 10 whom Tywin despised. Cersei, we can be certain, will press her claim or most likely manipulate events to become her father's heir. Speaking of heirs, Prince Viserys and the pregnant queen Rhaella have escaped to Dragonstone. The garrison under the fiercely loyal Sir William Derry proved somewhat split on what to do in the main series timeline. Any doubts then are now likely erased in the wake of this last atrocity of the Mad King. The fires raging in King's Landing would likely be visible from Dragonstone. And finally, in case anyone's forgotten, unbeknownst to anyone yet living but themselves, the remainder of the Kingsguard wait patiently at the Tower of Joy, honouring the final wishes of the fallen Prince Rhaegar. Let's deal with the relatively obvious. The Tyrells and Martells eagerly accept promises of amnesty and distance themselves from the Mad King in light of his snuffed flame. The Tyrells folded as soon as the Mad King was dead previously, and the Martells will come to that peace table far easier when Robert's hands aren't drenched in the blood of Elia and her children. That more or less ensures peace and stability to a shell-shocked Westeros, and may even prove beneficial in the long run, but more on that in a bit. When reliable reports reach Dragonstone, even the stoutest hearts would reconsider their current loyalties. Should Sir William Darry remain stubbornly honourable, the overwhelming majority of the garrison is liable to mutiny regardless and turn over their captive dragons to Robert. With the Tyrells and Martells neutralised as threats, Ned begins his search for Lyanna. We don't know how Ned found out Lyanna was at the Tower of Joy, but a good wager is that someone at the Red Keep was able to tell him. Perhaps Ethan Glover, who had been held captive by Aerys until liberated by the fall of King's Landing. Who knows? Ned is working from scratch. Rhaegar's known predilection for Summerhall might give Ned a hint, but that's a real damn stretch, and Ned's not got an abundance of time to figure this out. If Ned somehow finds the Tower of Joy, the Kingsguard will have been watching over a corpse and an infant for some weeks. We still don't know exactly why the fight at the Tower of Joy took place, but if there's still one, we can safely presume it ends much the same way, and Ned gazes upon his sister's embalmed corpse as he is told that Lyanna's last words were a plea for him. He takes the infant Jon Snow and her body from the tower, even more distraught now arriving too late to reassure her himself. But one thing to consider is if the Kingsguard stay put or go on the move to keep Jon safe. That may be far harder to do with Seven Kingdoms being no friends with the Targs. The best bet is to flee to Starfall, but even then, things are dicey, and trying to track these men down will be far harder and harder. If they leave Lyanna's body at Starfall, then Ned's hunt might stop. But this is a man with a strong sense of justice, and he might hunt these men to the ends of the world for the truth. As horribly depressing as that was, Westeros in some ways may be better off due to Aerys' bonfire. With the Mad King already disposed of, the Martell's thirst for vengeance in Ilya's name, let alone to enact Targaryen restoration, will be drier than the desert. Similarly, the Reach will return to largely minding their own affairs, as they canonically do during Robert's reign. The trickiest knots to untie revolve around the fate of children. Prince Viserys and Daenerys Stormborn, as well as Tyrion Lannister. Starting with Dany and Vizzy would be the third, admittedly, this requires the most speculation and thus an increased variety of plausible scenarios. One way or another, Robert wants them permanently dealt with. But once they are formally turned over, there is no way to do so without besmirching his honour. We can guess that simply Hulk smashing the baby dragons is off the table, but so long as Eva lives, they present a plausible figurehead around which the opposition may rally, no matter how small that is. With Viserys, there's actually a pretty easy way to remove him, without any Bloodraven-esque shenanigans. Send him to the Night's Watch. After all, it would not be the first time a Targaryen was sent to the wall in the name of political stability. Daenerys, on the other hand, has neither as neat an alternative calling, nor could be disposed of cleanly. As a baby, any sudden disappearance could open the floor to the later pretenders, as we see with young Griff and Aegon. Yet, as a female child, it will be a long time before she matures into even a latent threat. The safest and most honourable solution would be to promise her to the faith when she reaches the appropriate age. This too has its precedence in Westerosi history, as when Maegor sent his great niece Rhaella to Old Town for the same purpose. So long as she sires no further dragons, the stag may nurture its own offspring without due challenge. Next, we have the Lannisters. Robert, bereft of Lyanna, likely still marries Cersei and possibly takes Tyrion as a ward. The other houses would feel less than comfortable with the crown inheriting control of the Molten Store, as well as the Westerlands, so as a compromise, the Westerlands follows tradition and goes to Tyrion. Cersei is predictably furious and hates Robert even more than she normally does, but hey ho. Unfortunately for our gaslighting queen, her position is tenuous at best. So long as she fails to sire an heir, she is a political liability rather than an asset. While it is not beyond her capability to find some lackey to fertilize her fields, without Tywin's golden reputation standing behind her, any intrigue to topple the overproud lioness has far better odds at succeeding. Tyrion, as the diminutive Lord Paramount of the Westerlands, gains from his losses, and dodges a massive life-altering bullet with the Tysha issue. To ensure Lannister loyalty, Tyrion is handed to Jon Arryn, who replaces that bastion of paternal Tywin love. Tyrion develops the same intellectual side as his main series counterpart, but crucially, not the imp persona. While his tastes for whores and wine largely stems from his daddy issues, here it is an emulation of his older foster brother, the King. Arryn did not or could not stop Robert from loving women and wine. With the impressionable young Tyrion, he can at least impose some restraint so that it does not collapse into a dissolution. Funnily enough, people might actually think Jon Arryn possesses too much power as his connections stem from east to west, but it's a solid hand on things. Geographically, without King's Landing, the Crownlands likely folds back into the Stormlands. Maybe a couple of counties handed out to Hoster Tully for joining the winning side at the right time. I personally think there's little point in rebuilding King's Landing. The effort that would go into it just wouldn't be worth it. It would be a huge strain on the kingdoms to do so. With no capital and Iron Throne, does Robert become king of the Seven Kingdoms? King's Landing represented Targaryen power. Let its ashes be a reminder of that. The capital is now likely Storm's End, unless Robert looks to build a more centralized location. But with King's Landing and the Iron Throne gone, I'm not sure how many generations the Seven Kingdoms last before they all become independent and either fall into fighting one another for full control, or just maintain decent connections between one another. It's possible you might get some sort of United Nations diplomatic city for people to maintain relationships with one another. Who knows? I would argue though that there's likely a devastating economical effect with that densely populated city of 500,000 going bye-bye. All the trade routes that revolved around feeding that city are going to have an abundance of supply that they might not be able to get rid of for a good price. That will have a knock-on effect, I'm sure. And now we come to the conclusion. From a top-down perspective, the Seven Kingdoms are more stable than the Cold War which distinguished the Crown Stag in the main series. The Martells and Tyrells lack figureheads on which to base any potential opposition, the Westerlands are not a destabilising presence in absence of Tywin's ambitions, and the North, Riverlands, Vale and Stormlands were never threats to break the King's peace anyway. Like a broken bone, the shattering of the dragons makes for a stronger mending under the Stag. Wait, are we forgetting someone? They can't be that important if we are. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you liked this, be sure to say thanks to Tobby, who once again wrote this video. You'll probably find him in the comments under Warlord of Britannia.